Hi, subscribe to the channel, and for 1000 subscribers on the channel a video with stories for 24 hours will be released and also a bonus which you will learn about in the future.
Alexei lived a measured life with his wife Olga and 2 children. Working as a police officer, he spent a lot of time at work, but always tried to pay attention to his family. Lately, he noticed that Olga had become colder towards him and the children. She often stayed late at work, citing urgent matters, and stopped taking an interest in family matters. One evening, when Olga was late at work again, Alexei decided to go home early. He saw her phone on the kitchen table, which she had forgotten to take with her. For the first time in a long time, he had the time and opportunity to check her messages. Alexei was wary, but decided to take this step. He unlocked the phone and began to look through the messages. Among the many ordinary correspondence with friends and colleagues, one name caught his attention: Victor. It was the manager of their police station, a man with whom Alexei had crossed paths many times in his work. The messages with Victor hinted at meetings that were clearly not business. Alexei began to read the messages more carefully. Each new message confirmed his worst fears. They exchanged intimate photos and messages in which they discussed their secret meetings and plans for the future. Olga wrote about her feelings for Victor, about how she was tired of pretending to be a happy wife, and how she dreamed of a new life with him. Shock and pain overwhelmed Alexei. He could not believe that the woman he loved and with whom he lived for so many years betrayed him in such a way. His heart was squeezed with pain and resentment, but gradually these feelings began to give way to anger and determination to sort out the situation to the end. Alexei knew that he could not just leave this betrayal alone. Alexei thought for a long time about what to do. He did not want to make a scene in front of the children, so he decided to wait until they fell asleep. At night, after the children went to bed, Alexei sat in the kitchen and waited for Olga to return. Olga returned late, around midnight. She looked tired and a little worried. Seeing Alexei in the kitchen, she slightly flinched but tried to hide her anxiety, putting on her usual smile. "Why aren't you sleeping so late?" she asked, trying to speak as calmly as possible. "I was waiting for you," Alexei answered reservedly, not taking his eyes off her. Olga put her bag on the table and sat down opposite him, trying to look relaxed. "Did something happen?" she asked with slight anxiety in her voice. Alexei didn't beat around the bush. "Who is Victor?" he asked, looking intently into her eyes. Olga turned pale. For a second, panic flashed in her eyes, but she quickly pulled herself together. "Victor? He's my boss." "Why?" She tried to speak confidently, but nervous tension still slipped into her voice. "Don't lie to me, Olga," Alexei said firmly. "I saw your messages. I know everything." Olga's face turned chalk white. She tried to say something, but the words got stuck in her throat. Alexei continued to look at her, making it clear that he would not tolerate lies anymore. "How long has this been going on?" he asked coldly. Olga lowered her eyes, unable to withstand his gaze. "About a year," she whispered, barely audible. Alexei felt anger flare up inside him. "You've been lying to me all this time, sleeping with him while I worked to provide for our family." His voice trembled with rage. "How could you?" Tears welled up in Olga's eyes, but she could not say anything in her defense. Alexei continued to look at her, feeling anger overwhelm him with renewed vigor. "I don't know what I'm going to do next," he said finally. "But one thing I know for sure. You betrayed me and our family, and I will never forgive you for this." Olga sat with her head down, unable to utter a word. Alexei stood up and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her alone. That night he couldn't sleep, thinking about his next steps and planning how to deal with this betrayal. The next day, Alexei, still in a state of shock and rage, began to develop a plan. He knew that he had to act carefully and thoughtfully. His work in the police taught him the importance of collecting evidence and not acting on emotions. The first thing he decided to do was check Olga's phone for additional evidence. He knew that access to her phone could give him more information. Having waited for the moment when she left the phone unattended, he took it and began to look through the messages and photos. In the phone, He found not only many messages from Victor, but also several photos in which they were together in compromising situations. These photos were the last straw for Alexei. He made copies of all the messages and photos to have additional evidence. Alexei's next step was to talk to Victor directly. He knew that confronting his wife's lover would be difficult, but he was prepared for it. He found Victor at the police station and approached him when he was alone. "We need to talk," Alexei said. He shook his head, but quickly understood what was being said. He nodded and offered to go into the office. When the door closed behind them, Alexei began the conversation. "I know about you and Olga," he said bluntly, "and I have proof. I want you to end all relations with her and leave our family alone." Victor tried to remain calm, but his eyes were worried. "Listen, Alexei, I understand that you are angry, but it is not that simple," he began. "I love her too." Alexei felt rage flare up inside him. "You have no idea what I have been through," he said through clenched teeth. "You destroyed my family, but I am not going to let this go." Victor tried to object, but Alexei interrupted him. "You will leave her alone, or I will make you regret every day you crossed paths with her," he said firmly. "I have all the evidence, and I can use it at any time." Victor realized that Alexei was serious, and it seemed that he realized that he could not resist him. He nodded, admitting defeat. "Okay," he said quietly. "I will stop everything. But please do not ruin my career." Alexei looked at him coldly. "I will do this only for our children," he said. "But know that if you come near my family again, I will not spare you." Victor nodded, realizing that he had no choice. Alexei left the office, feeling that the first step of his plan was complete. Now he had to talk to Olga and explain that she had to make a choice. He knew that there would be many difficult conversations and decisions ahead, but he was ready to fight for his family. Alexei decided that Victor's words alone would not be enough. He understood that a more reliable solution was needed to eliminate the threat to his family once and for all, and so he devised a complex plan that would allow him not only to take Victor out of the game, but also to protect himself and the children. The first step was to set a trap for Victor. Alexei knew that his colleagues from the anti-corruption department had long suspected Victor of dishonesty. Alexei decided to take advantage of this. He contacted a trusted colleague, Peter, and outlined his idea. "Petya, I need your help," Alexei began when they met in a secluded place. "I know that you are working on Victor's case. I have a plan to trap him." Petr listened carefully to his friend and agreed to help. Alexei told him about all his evidence and what he had learned about Victor and Olga. Together they developed a plan that was guaranteed to frame Victor and deprive him of all opportunities for maneuver. The following week, Petr and his team began actively monitoring Victor. They installed a wiretap in his office and began collecting evidence of his corrupt activities. Meanwhile, Alexei continued to lead his normal life, trying not to arouse the suspicions of either Olga or Victor. On the day the plan was supposed to work, Alexei received a message from Peter. "Today everything is ready. Victor is trapped." Alexei felt his heart beat faster. He knew that this was the moment of truth. In the evening, Alexei returned home and, pretending to be calm, told Olga that they should talk. "We need to discuss everything," he said, trying not to reveal his true emotions. Olga agreed, although her eyes showed concern. "Victor agreed to end all relations with you," Alexei began. "But I want you to make a choice. Either you stay with our family, or you go to him. You can't continue to live on two fronts." Olga looked confused. "Alexei, I don't know what to say. It's all so complicated." But at that moment, their conversation was interrupted by a phone call. Alexei picked up the receiver and heard Peter's voice. "Everything is ready. We have arrested Victor. He is already at the station." Alexei felt relieved and said to Olga, "You won't have to choose. Victor has been arrested for corruption. Now he will not be able to interfere in our lives anymore." Olga froze, not knowing what to say. Alexei realized that his plan had worked. Victor was out of the game, and now he could focus on restoring his family. However, despite the relief, Alexei understood that there was a lot of work ahead. It was necessary to restore trust and love in the family, and this required time and effort. But he was ready for this, knowing that he had done everything to protect his loved ones. Alexei sat in his office, carefully thinking over his plan. He knew that simply exposing Victor was not enough. It was necessary to deal such a blow from which he would not be able to recover. It was important for Alexei not only to restore justice, but also to show that no one could destroy his family so easily. The first step Alexei decided to take was to use his knowledge of Victor. He began collecting incriminating materials, conversation recordings, photographs, financial documents. He wanted to have enough evidence not only to accuse Victor of corruption, but also to show his true face to everyone. One evening, Alexei met Peter at their usual place. Peter, his trusted friend and colleague, listened carefully to Alexei and agreed to help. "We have enough evidence to start the operation," said Peter. "We will do everything quietly and carefully. No one will guess that this was our work." The next day, Alexei and Peter began to act actively. They distributed the collected materials through all possible channels, to the police, to the press, among Victor's colleagues. Alexei even organized a leak of information on social networks to create maximum resonance. A few days later, the media published the news. High-ranking police officer arrested for corruption and blackmail. Victor found himself in the spotlight, and his career was destroyed in an instant. Olga, seeing this, realized that Alexei would stop at nothing to protect his family. Alexei decided to go further. He gathered all his friends and acquaintances who had ever suffered from Victor's actions and organized a press conference. At this meeting, they told their stories, showed evidence, and described how Victor had used his position for personal gain. "This man deserves to be punished," said one of Alexei's friends. "We cannot allow such people to remain free." The press conference caused a great public outcry. People began to demand justice, and under public pressure, Victor was sent to court. Alexei knew that this was only the beginning, but he felt that he had done everything possible to punish the offender. Olga was beside herself at this time. She understood that her relationship with Victor was ruined forever. Alexei, seeing her condition, decided that the time had come for a final conversation. "Olga," he began, "I know that you made a mistake, but now you see what it led to. I cannot forgive you right away, but I am ready to try. Let's try to start all over again for the sake of our children." Olga, with tears in her eyes, agreed. Alexei knew that there was still a lot of work ahead, but he was sure that he could cope with all the difficulties for the sake of his family. Several months had passed since Victor's arrest. Alexei and Olga's lives gradually began to return to normal, but the scars of betrayal would remain a reminder for a long time. Alexei continued to work in the police, his reputation only strengthened after solving Victor's case. Colleagues and superiors respected him for his courage and dedication to the cause. Many sincerely admired his determination to restore justice. Alexei was offered a promotion, and now he occupied a more responsible and highly paid position. Olga, feeling guilty before her family, decided to change jobs and got a job as a volunteer at a local charity. She sought to atone for her guilt by helping those who found themselves in a difficult life situation. This activity gave her a sense of satisfaction and allowed her to regain her lost self-respect. The relationship between Alexei and Olga was complicated. Long conversations, joint visits to a family psychologist, constant attempts to restore trust. All this became an integral part of their lives. Alexei could not completely forget about the betrayal, but he saw how hard Olga was trying, and this gave him hope for the future. Alexei and Olga's children were also going through a difficult period. They felt the tension between their parents, but tried to support them and bring as much joy and positivity to the family as possible. Alexei and Olga, understanding that the children needed their love and support, did everything possible to compensate for the stress they had experienced. One evening, sitting in the kitchen over a cup of tea, Alexei and Olga started talking about the future. "You know, Alexei," Olga said, "I realized my mistakes and realized how dear our family is to me. I am grateful to you for the chance you gave me, and I promise that I will never betray your trust again." Alexei looked at her carefully. trying to catch every word. He saw the sincerity in her eyes and understood that they could really overcome all the difficulties. "I also learned a lot during this time," Alexei answered. "Life taught us a hard lesson, but I believe that we can cope. The main thing is that we are together, and we have a future." These words became a symbol of a new beginning for their family. Alexei and Olga decided to spend more time together, went on a trip to get away from all the problems and restore lost connections. Time passed, and their family really became stronger. Alexei and Olga were able to overcome their fears and doubts, learn to trust each other again, and appreciate every moment spent together. As for Victor, his fate was sad. The court found him guilty of corruption and abuse of office, and he received a long prison sentence. His life was destroyed, and he lost everything he had. But it no longer mattered to Alexei and his family. They left the past behind and focused on their future. Thus, the story of Alexei and Olga became, "But fight for justice, remain true to your principles, and not be afraid to start all over again."